So Chief Driechel, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Good morning.
So you've been interim police chief this year for a while. It's been a month or so since you've been officially sworn in. What did you start working on first as you're officially the chief?
I think a couple things was just sit down with the leadership team and talk about, the state of the organization, kind of what it is we want to look at changing, right? Specifically, how are we talking about crime and disorder in our city? How are we going to try to tackle some of these problems? We also started having conversations about customer service, and the demands on the service right now are huge. Like, we've normalized in a lot of ways, it takes 3 days to get to a non-priority call. So how do we change that? So I'm starting to have those conversations.
Last year, when I sat down with former Chief McPhee, he said that he would like to see the next chief be an internal hire, which is the case for you. You were a deputy chief with him as well. Do you see yourself as a continuation of McPhee's approach?
I think in some ways, Chief McPhee came to the organization and really brought a different lens on policing. He brought kind of the community safety and well-being strategy, so working with partners, trying to create a little more accountability around these things I talked about, these social issues that are really plaguing our city. And we're going to continue that work. We have to. It's like we just cannot go back to the old style policing response and arrest everybody and charge people and figure that fixes the problem. I'm bringing a different lens, though, again, of let's start talking again about the priorities of crime. I think we may have displaced that a little bit over the last couple of years. We weren't talking as much about how crime was impacting our communities. I think we expected that we were still doing that work. We kind of fell by the wayside just for many reasons. So that's kind of a big change that we're instituting here right now.
I think it was just a few days before it was announced that you were taking on this role that the letter came out addressing the plea agreement for the case of the death of a child, and EPS asking provincial officials to intervene in that. And we've seen that get pretty significant criticism after the fact, that it potentially against the charter, this is outside the role of police, this is interference in the justice system. Do you still see that as the right thing to do now that you're in this role?
We often talk about accountability and transparency, and the police are always held to that standard. And I think what we're looking for is equity, that there needs to be accountability and transparency across all levels of the justice system. Could there have been a red phone moment there to pick up the red phone and talk? Maybe. But we had been trying for weeks ahead of time to try to find, at least just get communication of what was going on there. And I recognize a lot of the criticism was about prosecutorial discretion, sits with the Crown, don't disagree. But what we wanted to know was, is there something we could do differently? Was there something that occurred within the investigation that led to this, right? And, I think that's just understanding those aspects that are really important. I can tell you that out of that, the Crown, there were some people removed from their positions, but even prior to that, we were sitting down and talking about how we repair this. So I think the idea was sit down, start to cause some common understanding, but back and forth, so they also understand that when we see these things, and you can appreciate from an investigative stance, when you have a team of investigators that investigate something like that is very horrific or something that's very, polarizing, and then they see that it changes at this side on the prosecutions, but there's no communication coming back. It's hard to keep the organization orientated in what the job is, right? I often hear from the membership, and again, I explained this to the Crown, and they didn't even realize this at the time, was our members are starting to say, why bother? Why would I bother charging? Because it's not going to get prosecuted anyways. So you can start to see this whole erosion of the whole system. And that's what I think we were hoping to prevent, was just this discourse that was leading to multiple levels of failure across all these things where people aren't going to do their job anymore.
Do you regret going public with those concerns rather than handling this with the Crown and with EPS sort of internally to figure out level setting on that issue?
No, and I've been asked this. I think given the set of circumstances and the time and where we were at with that one, probably would do it again, yes. And the reason being was that was going to trial within a matter of days, and if that plea bargain was there, pretty well closes the door due to double jeopardy. We're now done, right? So we just wanted to force the issue and really talk about, let's get to the table and figure out why these things are happening. So no regret. I wish that we had never had to get there. I've said that. I didn't think that anybody should be in that position to have to be that polarizing, or we shouldn't, regardless if it's me or someone else or another police agency or another organization. It's a challenge, but I think something had to be said in this matter.
The other thing that's happened recently is the EPS pilot on body cams with facial recognition. That's rolling out. I know previously your role has had a lot to do with technology and dealing with these types of things. But the facial recognition aspect, there's been concerns raised by some Edmontonians and the Privacy Commissioner on this. So how do you think that rolling that out is justified, or how do you explain that to the public?
This is technology that's coming, right? This will be here one day. This is going to probably be more common than uncommon. And it's probably good to be an early adopter, to work with the vendors, the different levels of oversight, whether it's our police commission, city council, the privacy commissioner, to understand the nuances of that. And I always reflect on, if you don't do it right, if you do it wrong, the implications are huge. And it's that erodes trust in the police, for sure. It could actually impact policing at a grand scale, where if you do this wrong, nobody else can use it, or else the scrutiny of it is wrong. So I think the goal is to get out in front of it, work with the vendor, figure out those nuances, and work through those things to make sure that the use can be guided legitimately.
By the time people are sitting down with you again a year from now, and it'll be your first full year as chief, what do you hope to have accomplished, or what do you want to be able to tell us about what's changed?
The one thing I think I really focus on is perception of safety in the city. People don't feel safe. Some of the feedback we get through our public engagement, we hear it. I've heard it secondhand from, especially recently through the election, a lot of people knocking at doors of politicians, that people are talking about not feeling safe in their communities, not feeling safe in transit. Is what I'd like to have reflect on, is that people feel safer in their communities. One of the issues we hear a lot about downtown, and you work downtown, so you know it, is people don't feel comfortable downtown because of the disorder. And they see some of the open air drug use, and they see some of the, whether it's encampments or vagrancy or whatever it is you want to call it. And people, they've conflated this into like crime, right? So they see these disorder issues and they don't feel safe. So it's, again, reducing some of those things that are making people feel uncomfortable in their community, being more visible and present. And at the end of the year, hopefully next year, people start to say, yeah, we're feeling safer in this city. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're driving down crime or reducing crime, but we're being a little more proactive around the problems that are making people feel unsafe.
Well, thanks again for
Yes.
taking the time to
Awesome.
sit down with us.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great new year. Thank you.